All right.
Well, cool. Let's get rolling.
Let's do it.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. We're excited to be here. I've got Kendra and Seth with me. Guys, it was a good weekend.
It was all right.
Why was it just all right?
I mean, I guess it was good. Anytime you're talking about marriage, it's just like really tense in the room. And so, second service was really, really tense on Sunday. But it was a good tense. But I mean, you could like cut it with a knife.
I really just thought it was a okay Sunday because the Hogs lost.
That is also true.
Like, I think that affected a lot of people's mood. And then you just stack on talking about marriage, and people are already questioning their marriages after they saw that Hogs loss.
It's
so
true. It's very true.
It was a rough one. But it's a busy week at the church.
It is.
We got a lot going on.
There's a lot going on right now behind us. So
much
any
happening,
noises
yeah.
that you hear, I don't know what we can cancel out, but it sounds like people are literally wrestling downstairs.
I think they are. I think Seth and Caleb are downstairs just like fighting
It's possible.
over spaghetti sauce.
It's possible.
If you know, you know. But yeah, we're going to talk about marriage today. I don't have a lot of experience in this
Do you have some
area.
advice for us,
No,
Mason?
I've got nothing. I'm just here to facilitate questions and to learn because I've got zero experience in this area.
It's good.
But there's also room to grow.
Yes.
Yeah, man. This is the time to learn.
Amen.
Yeah,
Well-
Kendra told me last night. She's like, I can't wait to roast you on the podcast.
I literally never said that.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, we're going to talk
I
about
believe
this.
it.
This is communication. There's effective communication, but sometimes in marriage, you hear what you want to hear. And did I just hear what I wanted to hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just want her to
Think
make
so.
fun of you. I think that's your love language.
I think she says stuff and just blacks out.
Did you see they came out with 2 new love languages?
What?
There's like the guy who did the 5 love language updated it. He did like more
Gary?
study. Is that his
yeah,
name?
it's his name.
What did-
What's the
did he
new
just
ones?
have an
don't get me
epiphany
lying,
or
I don't know.
something?
He said, I've done more study and I've come out with 2 new love languages. And it's like shared experiences and the other one I don't know.
Is that not quality time?
No, it's
Wow.
like bonding through experience.
Huh.
So like trauma bonding or situational.
Like mission trip.
Huh.
I would say that was one for us.
Yeah. That's when I knew I was going to marry Kendra, was on a mission trip.
Ooh.
I mean, I knew the first day I
So
met her.
intrigued.
We were in a
Everybody says
meeting.
that though. Everybody
Do you
says
want,
that one.
do you want to talk about this?
Well,
the day
I
met you?
think that just back for the mission trip, I think that you like see somebody in all forms on a
Yeah.
mission trip, and so
Ratchet, you see him. Yeah, no, but I knew the first meeting we had together. After the meeting, I told our pastor, I said, hey, I'm going to marry that girl. And he was like, you're not even allowed to even think about marrying her for like 3 months. And I was like, fair enough, because I was pretty bad at relationships. So,
yeah.
that's
What do
pretty
you think? This is a good question to get us started into this. Like, do we idolize marriage in the church? Especially we've got, you mentioned it yesterday. There's a lot of single dudes, a lot of single girls, and they're looking to get married. Do you think that's something that we've idolized in the church today?
I'll let Kendra go first.
I do. I think that we tend to do that. I think it's innocent.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, I think that obviously God created marriage. Marriage is good. But anytime I think you obsess over even something good, it can become unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe can see people lean that way. I think I even used to lean that way, but I believe it's innocent. I don't think that but some people just aren't aware, like they don't even realize they're doing it.
Yeah.
But marriage is also a good thing. So it's interesting.
Yeah. It is interesting. There's a tension because what we talked about on Sunday is, singleness in the world is, I feel like elevated above marriage in some arenas. And then in church, and then I feel like just in your family, they're like, hey, when are you going to get married? Do you hear that often, Mason?
Often. Very often.
When are you going to get married? When are you going to have a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever? And so it's like, I just think in church often, it's like we view singleness as, well, one day, or it's almost like this waiting season for the better thing that's ahead. And the thing that I tried to debunk on Sunday is that it's not if you treat it like a waiting season for what's next, it'll be a wasted season. And you don't want to waste what God has today, because sometimes we focus so much on what hasn't happened yet or what we don't have, that we miss God's best in the moment. I see that happening a lot, and it happened for us too. I mean, I idolized marriage. I was like, and I think it's a healthy thing to long for it. But I think when it becomes a problem is when you long for it so much, you miss God's best today, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians about using that singleness season. Like, he desires that even married people act as if they were single, to serve the Lord as if they were single. Yep. What do you think that looks like? Because obviously we're not telling married people to act single.
Yeah, right.
But, like, what does that mean? What does that look like to act that way in the way that we serve the Lord?
When I hear that, Seth always references this verse for other reasons, but I think about Revelation 2 where, it says, don't forget your first love. You've forgotten your first love. I think a lot of times, even when we get married, we forget our first love because we begin to, like, marriage is such a goal for so many people. It's like you reach the goal and subconsciously you don't even realize it, but you're like, thanks God, now I'm going to live life the way I want to live it. Not necessarily, and I don't think a lot of people realize they do it, but it's like they just reached that goal or that prayer that they were praying for. And I think it's just easy to make their own decisions and not bring God in the middle of that. And so when Paul says, to serve like you're single, I think that it's really easy in marriage to get comfortable and even selfish within. Like Seth and I love to do things together and to have, I don't know, just to like prioritize us, maybe even like above the things of God. And I think that we constantly have to evaluate and make sure that we haven't forgotten our first love, even though we have each other.
So good.
Like, God is our first love, and, we need to make sure that we're doing first what He would have us do. And it's just easy. I think when you're single, it's a really beautiful thing because you don't really have that distraction. And when you're married, I think that it makes it a level harder. And I don't really think that's talked about enough. Like, you need a new level of discipline, almost. So, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think to kind of go off what Kendra said, anything that takes your eyes off Christ is an idol. Anything, yeah, that's so good. And so, like, Kendra and I have said this a million times. We heard this a million times as we were dating and getting ready for marriage, and then also before we even met each other. And anyone watching has probably heard this too. It is that you are to pursue Christ, and you look to the left or right, see who's keeping up. You pursue Christ, left or right, who's keeping up, and then if there comes a day where you're like, hey, you don't ever want to look way behind and try to go missionary date. You want to have someone that's either in front of you or beside you, equally yoked. And that was the case for Kendra. I felt like she was ahead. And so I was like, out of my league, as many people would say. But I think anytime our eyes get fixated on anything other than Christ, it could be a job, it could be an opportunity, it could be a person, it could be a friendship, it could be anything. It could be a problem, it could be a circumstance, it could be marriage. It's like, well, God brought this together. I'm supposed to be focused on it, and yes, partially true, but the day that your eyes off Jesus and it's just on, like if we just focused on each other and there's nothing else that we are looking at and striving towards, we will end up going backwards because we are both sinful. And when we focus on anything other than Christ, it's not going to end well. And so we are still learning this. And I feel like we will always have to deal with that tension of keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. And so, yeah.
Even like with our calendar, I feel like we really pride ourselves in like protecting our calendar and our family because ministry is like, but this goes for everybody. We all live busy lives, but we never stop evaluating. But wait, is this something God's asking us to do? Like even not falling into having boundaries and having health in our schedule, but also, but wait, is God asking us to do this? Is this a situation? And I think like that has to happen with every area of your life, because it can just happen to where you get into a rhythm of this is just what we do, and you forget to consult God, And so it's just, I feel like it's easy to do that in marriage.
Oh yeah,
So,
it's good.
yeah.
To all the single people, and really, I mean, I feel like I'm talking like IRS level single. Like, if you're not married, you're single.
IRS
Like,
level
that's the best way to
Never heard
describe
that.
it.
I've never heard that.
You put that on your taxes. You either file
Bro, that
married
is so funny.
or you're single. There's not a dating thing to the government. They don't justify
true.
that.
I'm
Yeah.
stealing that one. My
You're
friend.
welcome.
That
That
is.
was
I'm
free.
tracking with you.
That is
IRS
very
level
good.
single.
So IRS level single. Anybody who desires to be married, what should they be looking for in themselves before they go looking for another? Like, what's something they need to look for internally? It's a loaded question.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
What to look for in themselves before?
Yeah, to know, like, if they're desiring to be married, they want to say, hey, like, I'm ready for this. They may be dating somebody. What do they need to be looking, like, where do they need to be within their own walk with Christ or
Yeah.
internally?
Yeah, we're even talking about this on Thursday in regard to college ministry, just about, like, are you a dateable person? Like, are you, like, would you date you? Well, like,
Every day.
You said every day?
Every day. I'm treating
And what I mean by that is, like, do you have the qualities in your own life that you are longing for to find in someone else? Are you faithful? Do you have integrity? Do you have character? And I mean, I could just go down the list. And then also, do you take care of yourself? Like, are you healthy? Is your body healthy? Is your mind healthy? Are you prioritizing counseling? Are you spending time with Jesus? Like, all of those things were a harsh reality for me because I wanted to be with someone so bad that it's like I just wanted that. And if I could get that, then everything else would be great. And the reality is, marriage just exposes all of your problems anyways. And so it magnifies all your issues. And so if you don't take care of your issues and your problems before marriage, it's just, they're all going to be exposed and magnified in marriage anyways. And so why not address those things now so that you can become the person that you want to be with? And then you will find someone who's on the same playing field. But if you don't do that, there's no standard and you'll just settle for anything. And so it's just, yeah. I think that looking for the qualities that you desire in someone else, looking to possess them yourself is like vital.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, I would just say evaluate like where you're at in all of your health, spiritual health, mental health, physical health, emotional health, and maybe even rate yourself and then share that with a trusted mentor. And then if you don't have a mentor, that's a whole nother conversation. That's a good place to start.
That's good.
But I would say if I could go back, I had people speaking into my life. I would have opened up a lot more about the emotional side because I didn't realize how much healing I needed in that area. And I would have let someone in that, and if I would have been honest and let someone speak into that area of my life, I feel like it would have saved Seth and I a lot of just things we had to walk through when we first got married. Things we're still walking through, honestly.
Lots of things.
Lots of
Y'all
things.
don't have a perfect marriage?
No.
No, we don't. But we have a lot of fun. So yeah, I think like self-evaluation is crucial. And if you aren't doing that, then I don't know how you could confidently say that you're preparing if you're not like analyzing like where am I at?
That's good.
You know what I mean? And letting someone and then opening up where someone else can speak to that.
And I think to go off that, Kendra, like if you don't have a mentor or people like, so there, I have several older gentlemen in the church that are members of this church that speak into my life as the pastor. And I think it is vital. I think it is God's design. I think it is like mandatory if you plan on being a man or a woman of God to have people that are sharpening you. What is it? Man's plans fail to lack of wise counsel. And it's like a lot of people are like, well, I do have counsel. It's like, but they ain't wise. And I don't know that I would ask them even how to cook a cheeseburger. It's like definitely not going to ask them about marriage or finances or emotional and all of these things. And so I think that piece is vital because if you don't have someone that's sharpening you and being honest, like gut level honest. We've had lots of these conversations, Mason.
Way too many.
And
Way
so,
too many.
and it's been so helpful though, because you were able to look in the mirror. What we've called it is the mirror of a mentor, and you can see. There's some things you can't see, and we call those
Blind spots.
Blind spots, and they're blind spots because you can't see them, right? But a mentor, someone who loves you and believes in you and wants God's best for your life, they're gonna say, "Hey, man, there's something hanging out of your nose that you can't see. Not now, but there's something that you can't. There's something in your life that you can't see. There's a hole here. There's a downfall." And if you don't become aware of it, it could be the reason that you fall very hard.
Yeah.
And when it comes to dating, man, Kendra and I, if we could go all the way back, even before high school, right? For me,
yeah, definitely. Same.
man, if I would have got that figured out sooner, I could have saved myself so many problems.
And other people. Just the hurt
because we
and the
cause pain for other people.
Yeah, definitely. But I would also just like to add, that is not just for a season of singleness.
Yeah.
That's for
Every-
every season of life. And I do feel like that's a misconception that you only need mentorship in a singleness season.
Yeah.
And then when you get married, you've arrived. I think we need more mentorship now than ever, especially with raising kids in the world that we're in.
Yes.
We need more help now. Our free time is fewer, so it's harder to prioritize it. But I definitely think it's something that we have to make sure we're constantly doing. And not that that's more important than hearing from the Lord and that relationship, but having healthy people that you trust in your life, especially for us, people that are in ministry and people that aren't in ministry that we're able to learn from, I think is crucial. So I just wanted to make sure that's not just for the singleness season. Definitely important then, but even more important, we talk about postmarital counseling a lot. Why is postmarital counseling not as big of a thing as premarital counseling?
It may be more important.
Definitely.
It could be a stretch. Obviously, premarital counseling is vital so that you don't end up marrying someone that you're not supposed to be married to. But postmarital counseling, we've had more postmarital counseling, professional, and then also just with people we trust. I would say 100 times more counseling. I can't tell you the amount of phone calls. We call it calling in a referee because we're on the same team. But Satan is a liar, and he often would like for us to look at this as if we are opponents. And it definitely feels that way sometimes, especially in the heat of a moment. But that's when one of us has the maturity and the discipline enough. Whoever's in the best headspace, it varies depending on the day. I would say,
Definitely
typically it's me, I'm just kidding. But to call someone and say, hey, I need your help. Kendra and I are having a moment, and we just need someone else's opinion. And some people will never make that call because of pride. Because, I don't want people to judge me or think about me differently. I'm telling you, we are pastors, and we are so imperfect. We come from lots of brokenness, and we don't have this thing figured out, and we're desperate for God's will for our life. We're desperate for healing in our own lives, and we want our kids to see a healthy marriage. And they're going to see the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But one thing that we recently learned in a counseling appointment was, which we should probably go to more of those, was oftentimes our kids will see the problem start. If it's a miscommunication, disagreement, one of us raises our voice or whatever it is, but they don't see the resolution. And so, because oftentimes we're like, hey, let's not have this conversation here, and then we resolve it elsewhere, which is
private.
And there's pros and cons to that, but they only see they don't see the bringing it back down. And hey, mommy and daddy are not perfect. Hey, mommy and daddy make mistakes.
Well, and mommy and daddy made it right.
Yeah,
we need to do a better job, especially with our oldest son, Zane. I think he remembers that there was a tiff.
Yep.
And maybe is just starting to realize maybe I never saw them resolve it. And we don't want him to have the misconception that we just swept it under the rug. We want him to know that the conversation happened. We did work it out. that doesn't always happen in his presence. So we're trying to figure out what that line is.
Yeah, we just bring him in, let him
Let him
watch.
sit there. We give him like a whistle and a referee shirt, and we just like do it in front of him.
But you know, for a little kid, it's as simple. And you might be listening to this, and you've got grown kids or teenagers. Man, it's as simple as just letting them know, hey, we are not perfect, but we always will do what it takes to make it right. We don't live our life with all this stuff just pushed down, waiting to explode, swept under the rug. It's like, no, we make it right. And I'm not the type of person that can even function the next day unless I know that this is good. And y'all know it. I could show up to the office, y'all be like, something's off with Seth today. I bet him and Kendra may have gotten a little argument.
100%. That's always what it is.
That's always.
And so
Seth always started it.
I wear my heart on my sleeve. There's pros and cons, but yeah, I think going back to the original question, man, I think it is vital to look for in other people, you know, what we first possess in ourselves, but then also just that mentorship piece in marriage, but also definitely in IRS singleness.
That was the best.
So
It's
funny,
just,
dude.
it's how they classify it.
So
It's good.
good. It's
You gotta
so
know.
good.
Well, getting into kind of what you talked about yesterday, catchy sermon title, Submission and Sacrifice. That little section of scripture in Ephesians 5 is powerful. And you said this about marriage. It's between a man and a woman submitting first to God, the wife submitting to the husband, and the husband laying down his life for his bride. Because love is sacrificial, marriage is sacrificial, and following Jesus is sacrificial. Why do you think this is so controversial and so counterculture in the context of marriage?
You want to go first, babe?
Well, I think that submission and sacrifice are the opposite, or maybe even like they're just dangerous words to like our human nature, which is selfishness. I don't really know if I worded that in a way it makes sense, but I think like our nature is to be selfish.
100%.
Like we're born selfish beings, that we're wired to think about ourselves. And so when you take two words, you know, like submission and sacrifice, it's just so outside of our sinful nature.
They're selfless words,
They're selfless words. That's so good, Mace. And so it's not something that's going to come naturally. And I think that because it doesn't come naturally and it requires work, that's why we don't see it as often. And I think that's just marriage in general too. Like marriage is work. A good and healthy marriage is work. And so, yeah, but that's what I think of, is that it just goes against our selfish nature. And that's why it's so counterculture, because culture is so like, do what's best for you and what's pleasing to you and what's pleasurable for you. And if they don't understand you, then, you know, be done with them. And that's so not what the Word of God says. And so I don't know. That's just
That's
the
really
first
good.
thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think
that-
also that, like you nailed it. Humans are selfish. We're born into sin. The absolute opposite of who we worship, who is perfect. He is without any blemish, without any defect, without any sin. And so he is perfect. He is holy, and he still chose to get low in humility, to take on flesh, to live a life, a perfect life, to be tempted the way that we are tempted, to endure those things, but to choose his Father's will above all things, and then to lay his life down as a ransom for many, and then die and resurrect. And then what's beautiful, and this is where I really tried to land on Sunday, is the Spirit that raised him from the dead lives inside of us as a Christ follower, which is the only way that we can submit, and it's the only way that we can sacrifice, because in our human nature, we are so broken that those words are like cuss words, like submission. And that's why the world has twisted and distorted, and Satan has had a heyday with that, like of submission specifically. But then sacrifice, is even more of this, like, it's like these two taboo topics, and God is saying, hey, a God-honoring marriage, biblical
Yeah.
marriage, it's submission and it's sacrifice. But the beautiful thing is that Jesus would never ask us to do something he wasn't willing to do first. Now, he wasn't married. He was single. And
IRS single.
Yeah, IRS single. And but he modeled submission and he modeled sacrifice to the utmost degree. And so he's saying, hey, if you want the world to see a glimpse of heaven, the relationship between the church, the bride of Christ, and the groom, then you have to be able to submit first to him, submit to each other, and then sacrifice and lay down your pride, your ego, your own ambitions. And so it all is full and encompassing. You know, it's beautiful.
And it's hard.
It's so hard.
It's very hard. And it's
yeah.
a muscle you have to work over and over and over. And when you stop working it, it will become weaker and it will get harder to get back in the rhythm. And so it's just not natural for us. But I will say the more we do it, it becomes easier and more, like, obviously with Christ, like, it can become more of the nature. But it's also easy to get in seasons where you stop doing it.
Yep.
You know? And we're very guilty of that, especially when everything gets a little crazy in the name of doing good work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just like, I don't know, we accidentally enrolled Zane in like 7 sports at the same time. I don't know. We were like, the one thing we said we'd never do is not really, just 2, but it feels like 7.
It feels like a lot, yeah. Yeah.
And so, but schedule gets crazy and then we forget. It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
You know, submission and sacrifice.
I want to read verse 21, Ephesians 5. And it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so what's crazy is thinking of and I think about this often, Mason, trying to envision our life and our marriage without Christ, because it says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. But you love Christ, so you revere him. You respect Christ, you revere him. So, like, and that's this relationship he wants here. But without Jesus, man, like, without Jesus, without him modeling submission, sacrifice, humility, getting low, serving, being the first to serve, like, I don't know how any marriage works. And I mean that. Like, and I mean that with, like, the most pure heart possible. I don't know how it is possible to be married and to stay married without Jesus being the example of the things he's asking us to do. And so, and we say it often, it's like, man, if we did not have the Lord in our life, this thing would have probably ended a long time ago, because we are selfish people. And so, I mean, truly, and not to be cliche, but without the Spirit of God living inside of us, and then us surrendering to the Lord, marriage seems absolutely impossible.
Well, and you hit on, you know, it gets twisted a lot what submission and sacrifice looks like, and it honestly gets taken out of context and then abused. But what place is there for Kendra, you to say, Seth, you're not sacrificing for me, or Seth, you to say, Kendra, you're not submitting to, like, what place is there for that without it like crossing that line of you're abusing what Scripture says?
Well, and I can say it this way, like, in our marriage, I've never used the word submit. I don't think one time. And I honestly wouldn't recommend men to use that in your marriage. What we will say is this, is I don't feel respected. And that's what we really hit on yesterday. And this whole passage ends with talking about wives love your husbands, or husbands love your wives as Christ loves the church. And then it says for women to respect the husband. And, like, those two things, I think it is the surface and root issue of almost everything that we have that is tense in marriage. It's either I'm not showing her love and pursuing her. And we said that is a moving target. And as you have kids, dates get harder, date nights get harder, childcare, having, all of these things get more difficult. It doesn't mean that you should stop it, because marriage is hard, but hard things are worth fighting for. And so One of our values we do hard things, and marriage is hard. And so, but it's so rewarding. And so I know for Kendra, like when I feel respected, I'll do anything. I mean, I'm like, just tell me how awesome I am. And like, which is true. I'm words of affirmation. I love to be told good things. And it's just like,
Do you know hers?
She had all of them. It moves.
You put him on the spot.
Yeah, no, she likes gifts. She likes money.
Big expensive gifts.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but me being able to tell her like, hey, we have some extra funds. You can like do this or like that like gives her life. But what's interesting is with that money, she's not buying stuff for herself. She is going and buying gifts for other people, which
I've never gotten a
gifting
gift,
is like
Kendra.
receiving and giving.
Yes.
So I'm like gifting other people gifts.
And it used
Where's
to
my
drive me
Sorry.
crazy. I'm like, we're gonna write and cut out cards for people, but that was like a huge tense spot when we first got married, was the gift thing. But I mean, what would you say with the idea of like the submission and like the respect and love?
Well, you were asking Mason, like, is there a space to communicate that? You know, I think there is. I think it's all about your heart and how. And
Yep.
I would not even dare say on this that I'm great at this. But Seth and I have, like, in our marriage, we've definitely given each other permission. Like, please tell me if you feel, like I'm not sacrificing, or I'm not being respected, or I'm not feeling loved, or if I'm being overlooked. And so we just try to choose a time where we are disarmed. And we even ask each other, like, hey, is now a good time?
Which is a great question to ask, by the way.
Because Seth has asked me before, and I've said no.
No, it's not.
It's not a good time. I knew where that was going.
But Kendra has the ability. She has a superpower. She can shelf something and be unfazed by it for like days. Dude, it's unbelievable.
I don't know if that's a superpower. I think that's a...
I don't know. Maybe it's not a superpower. For me, I'm like, we have to fix this right now, or I'm going to literally self-implode. And I can't, I can't function. And so this was a huge sacrifice for me, was that sometimes Kendra needs some space, and she needs some time. And for me, I'm like, I just want to fix all this stuff.
Amen.
And so this has been a huge learning thing for me, when she's like, hey, I just need some time. And I'm like, oh, but it's so worth it to, so.
Well, and some of that is, too, like, I need time because I don't feel the conviction. And I know if he tries to talk to me about, I'm not going to be able to give him the right response because I'm not, and my heart isn't good. And so I want to, and I've just learned that if we try to dive into that before I'm ready, and I wish I was better, I'm just not always.
Confess and be
Confess and be healed. I just a little bit of time to let me process it and figure out where my emotions were at in that moment, and why I maybe did what I did, or figure out how I feel. Women and our emotions, like, it just takes a minute, I think, to get there sometimes. Like, what is really going on? And if I can just figure out, then I feel like I'm in a way better space to have a conversation with him about it. But just asking each other, like, hey, is now a good time for us to talk about this? And if Seth tells me no, I'm going to respect that and say, okay, can you let me know when is a good time? Because we definitely need to and then I think you can absolutely say, hey, lately I haven't felt like I'm a priority, and this is why, and my tone matters. I that's not the time to, like, here's my list of all the things I'm mad at you about. It's just like my heart has to be in a pure place, or he's going to be defensive. And same for him. Like,
I'll say something with that.
Yeah.
So I actually had I've had several conversations since the marriage talk, and it's been so good. I just believe God's doing a lot of incredible things in the church and through marriages and couples and people that desire to be married. And one of the things, and we haven't really wrote these things down, but Kendra and I have they're what we would call rules of engagement. And what that means is we have fighting rules. So if we're going to argue, and if we're going to disagree and fight about something.
I bet she hits hard.
Yeah, she punches really hard. I'm just kidding. We have rules. And so, like, some of those is like, never, ever is it in front of anybody else, period. It's just not.
especially our
children. And so like we love each other enough to try our best not to have any kind of that going on in front of our kids. What we're trying to work on, like we talked about earlier, is if that does happen, we show them the mommy and daddy make things right. You know, we love each other. And so like not in front of people. Number two, nothing is off the table. So there's nothing that's taboo in our marriage. There is not one single topic. There is not our past is, everything's out in the open. Nothing regarding her family, my family, finances, our upbringing, everything is up for discussion. Nothing is like, well, you can't talk about that. Because I've been in rooms where couples will say that, and I'm like, man, what is going on here? And so there's nothing off the table. But with that being said, when you have conflict and you're trying to solve conflict, you're not allowed to bring up things that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. Because if you did not prioritize, you can talk about it. It's just not going to be received well. No. Because we are adults and we have empowered each other to bring those conflicts to the table to find resolution. But if you choose to go a week or two without talking about something that's bothered you, it's not really going to be effective to bring it up way down the road. And so it's like there's almost like a time stamp on things.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then I think just we don't raise our voices. And so by that's one of the rules. That doesn't mean we don't. And so tone is everything, like Kendra said. And I think also, you know, these are just simple rules of engagement. If you're going to argue, the way you do it is very important. It's probably not wise to have that argument in your bedroom or in the bed, because that is a like holy and sacred place. And so take it on the back porch or on the couch in the living room or somewhere where there's privacy, but you can have that conversation, shelve it, and then go to sleep, and it not be this like tense place that you just had this big meltdown.
Wow,
if that makes sense. And so
protecting your marriage.
Yeah, we're just trying to help your future marriage, Mason.
Praise God. I need it. Praise God. Well, as we close, I want you to like give us one piece of advice for someone who's struggling with that submission or that sacrifice, whether it's Kendra, speak to the submission part to the wives, like if they're struggling with that, how to help with that, Seth, with husbands.
You want to go first?
You can go first.
Man, don't get married. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, but really, that was the advice yesterday. If you don't like sacrifice and you don't like submission, you're going to hate marriage. And it's better to be single one day desiring to be married than to be married desiring to be single one day.
That's good.
And man, I'm telling you, it is a lie from the pits of hell that your marriage is supposed to end because you just disagree or there's conflict or what. And I know every situation is different, but man, it is so important to ask these questions in singleness, IRS singleness. And so my one piece of advice would be simply this. It is impossible, and hear me, it is impossible to sacrifice for your spouse, to serve your spouse, to surrender to whatever, God is leading them to. It is impossible to lay your life down and submit to your spouse if you are not first submitted to Christ. You may be able to try to muster up strength for a day, but what about when you disagree? What about when they really do hurt you and hurt in it? And that is when you have to have Christ, because grace, a marriage without grace is a train wreck waiting to happen. A marriage without surrender to Christ is a train wreck waiting to happen. And so that's my advice, is like, if your life is submitted to Christ and you do, and he has the final word, when I go spend time with the Lord, he shows me real quick, hey, you were a little sharp with Kendra. Hey, the way that you handled that conversation earlier was not wise. And so that time with the Lord and surrender to Jesus is everything. That's for me.
Good.
I knocked the mic, Mace. Okay. I pulled up the definition of submission. I don't know if this is the same one you had in your sermon, but it says submission is defined as a humble attitude of obedience and surrender to another person or authority with an emphasis on trust and respect. it is not a sign of weakness,
That's right.
but rather a demonstration of faith and obedience. I think for a lot of women, the biggest piece of advice I would get would just be to try it. I think that as women, me included, we control so much, or we desire to control so much, that we don't even realize that we have never really submitted to anything, much less our husbands or the Lord. And so just try it. Try to have a humble attitude of obedience. Surrender to your husband. Like, quit trying to call all the shots and make all the plans and have everything go your way, because you trust and respect him. And don't see it as a sign of weakness, but as a demonstration of faith and obedience. I would genuinely just try it and see
So good.
how you see your marriage change. I know so much. Seth has said this before. We have 1,000 things going on always in our life, and that's God has called us to live this life. So I feel like my role is I'm constantly figuring out how we're managing it. And so I can get really tasky, robotic, like where I'm just calling out, like literally just like, this is what we're doing. And Seth's like a yes man, like, okay, whatever you need. Yeah. And there's like no life to me. I'm just like this. I just want so bad everything to operate as it's just supposed to. But it's a different situation whenever sometimes those things are necessary. But whenever we relax a little bit and I'm like, you know what do you think, babe? And I kind of just like let him lead. Now, he's going to default to me, I think, in a lot of situations, especially with the kids.
Well, in regards to the calendar, I would be a fool to try to do that, because I'm going to mess all that up.
But genuinely, a lot of times I can ask Seth, like, hey, what do you think? And he can give a word like, hey, babe, I just really think that if we just stop doing this and we just like chill here, everything's going to be okay. And it will like change everything about. And I'm like, man, I just needed that leadership in that moment. I needed to submit to that, because I guess what I'm trying to say is, when we as women try to take on the leading, controlling role of the marriage and the home, we get burnt out, we get tasky, we lose who I think God's created us to be in the nurturing nature that like he has given us, and our family doesn't get the best version of us. But whenever we take a step back and take a deep breath and maybe just let our husbands in on it a little bit, then that we become more submissive, and it's not weakness. It's just like, hey, what are your thoughts here? And then obviously there are other areas that he very like obviously leads in, but I think the home and the children and like all of the things is where we can hold tight. So I would just say try it. Just really try it and see how things change in your marriage. And I guarantee Seth always says I'm easier to serve when I'm nice.
That's a word from the Lord.
And I think that is a word, like, and I think we're nicer whenever we relinquish some of that control and we just submit. We're just like, okay, yeah, what do you think is best? Because I'm tired, you know. So, anyways, submission.
Yeah, and to tack on to what Kendra said, submission is a yielding too. It is. And we know what happens when you don't yield. You end up having wrecks. And I would just encourage anyone who's listening or watching this right now, that if your life is not first yielded or submitted to Christ first, period, everything else is going to seem chaotic, because if there's no lordship and there's no surrender and there's everything else is not going to seem right in finances and marriage, your relationships, your work. And so I would just encourage, like, with that, yes, if you're married, like, try submission, try sacrifice, but man, yield to Jesus. Because if you can get that right, if you can submit your life to Christ first, all the other stuff I feel like is just like, all the other blocks get knocked down. Hey, thank you guys for listening. And man, be sure to subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube or to download the podcast. Share it with a friend if you think this would be helpful for somebody else. We also share pieces of this on our social media on Facebook and Instagram, NLC Fayetteville. Thank you guys for listening. We love you. Have a good week.